Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on Positive Pulse, a Brookfield Properties initiative. This is a series of important conversations around your health and well being, and today's dialogue is on the goodness of Ayurveda, its role in improving your gut health and immunity. We bring this session in collaboration with award-winning wellness retreat Ananda in the Himalayas. Ananda is very well respected for its holistic treatments based on the principles of Ayurveda. And I am telling you, I'm a die-hard believer of the immense benefits of this ancient science and feel it's even more relevant in modern times. In fact, more so today with health becoming a priority for all of us. I've been able to rope in my favorite doctor, who's a consultant to Ananda in the Himalayas, Dr. Matthew, for today's session. Dr. Matthew, thank you very much for doing this for us at Brookfield Properties.
Namaskar, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be in conversation with you.
And we have a mix of people of all age groups working across our three business parks, which is Candor Tech Space, Equinox, and Powai Business District. So right now there are people from different geographies watching us. So let me start by asking you a very basic question. Everyone's talking about boosting immunity. Is that something which can be done easily? What does Ayurveda say about it?
Yeah, I think it's a very relevant question, especially in this current situation while we are suffering from this crisis. I think it depends on how we understand immunity. Immunity as a word in technical terms does not mean that it can be boosted or it can be quantified using any measures like blood pressure or like our blood sugar level, etc. Immunity can be really good to one particular kind of illness, like say, for example, somebody has had chicken pox or had immunization against polio, they will have immunity against those illnesses, but will not have any immunity against, say, this current flu or coronavirus incident. So, immunity essentially, if we look at it in a broader concept, if it is looked at as a resilience or a resistance ability to fight against illness, not just stay away from it, but if it happens to attack us, how we can recover from it. In that broader sense, it can be increased, and that's one of the most important aspects always focused in Ayurveda. The only thing slightly different is it's not something which is an output of a few days or few hours of activities or certain kind of food itself. It's an outcome of a long term of specific well-aware diet, activity plan, all of this. So when you ask me really if there is something to boost and resolve this issue that the whole world is suffering from, I don't think we have that magic yet.
Okay, but you're saying that you can boost. In fact, COVID-19 has taught us an important lesson that some people are able to come out of it when affected much faster than the other. And doctors are saying it's because those people have a better immune system. So tell us, I mean, in Ayurveda, what are the basic principles of boosting your immune system to be able to fight influenzas better?
Right. So immunity, like balance, for example, when we are born with really bad balancing ability. We can't stand or walk, or we can't fight against most pathogens. So human beings are born with really bad immunity or resistance and really bad balancing, both of which is learned over time, which gives us a lot of hope, because learning is always dependent on what kind of interactions you had with nature during your lifetime, and then from your interactions with various pathogens, bacteria, different microbes, you learn how to fight against it. You fall down, have a flu, and then recover from it, and then you have the immunity against it. Some of the times you may not have any symptoms at all, but you still develop an immunity against it. So Ayurveda always considers that it's a ongoing learning procedure. Now, because it's an ongoing procedure, it's well dependent on how we interact with the nature, and the most important interaction is our food, our diet itself. So there are so many things which Ayurveda focuses on as a concept to help with immunity, and all of them, very interestingly, is related to digestion or metabolism. So the basic concept of immunity in Ayurveda is called as ojas. I'm trying my best not to use too many Sanskrit words, but ojas is something which is very synonymous to this concept. And when we say ojas, it's not a substance in the body, but it's an outcome of a proper metabolic pathway or proper digestive function. So if your digestion, no matter what goes in to a large extent, your body is able to convert to things that you need and things that has to be eliminated. And the end result of this constant transformation process is resilience and strength. And this strength is not just a very simple direct resilience against a virus, it's more against any form of change. Usually change is stressful for human beings, whether it is physical weather related changes or it's related to even mental or emotional aspects, changes in diet habits. All of these are stressful, and how we cope with this change is dependent on how we are able to metabolize and develop this ojas or strength in our body. So Ayurvedic treatments always focuses on digestive fire or Agni, and the digestive fire being at its best means your immunity in time will be actually ready to cope with almost any possible challenges that
Right.
can be facing us.
All right. So let's talk about digestive health then. I mean, you talked about Ojas, which gives you the resilience, and Agni, which is your digestive power. And the better you can metabolize and digest your food, the better you will have resilience to change and maybe even diseases. When you talk about digestive system, I've heard this topic or word which says gut health. And they say if your gut is healthy, then your digestive system will also be healthy. Is that correct? And can you just give us a relation between gut health and the immune system?
Yes, gut is a very recent sort of a product of lot of researchers, and they have started learning about it and seeing direct correlation between our immunity, our resilience, and the gut bacteria. But Ayurveda has always spoke about, like I said, of this metabolic function and how this is related to our ojas. And yeah, when we talk about gut, like I said, we don't start with good immunity, so we have to develop it. And gut is sort of it's like a training ground. So that's where all our immunity sort of starts fighting with different things. Because as a child, what would you be normally doing is lick stuffs and put things in your mouth straight away, without even thinking whether it is food or anything. Your tactile sensation is partly from your mouth only. So you start sort of interacting with nature, and your gut starts getting sort of crowded with lots of bacteria. Some of them are even pathogenic, could cause illness, and some of them are not that virulent, not that attacking in nature. So the child's immunity starts learning from there, and in that learning process, it starts to find that some of these bacteria can actually break down some of the food when we start weaning, those foods which we can't break down with our own metabolic system. It is one of the best efficient system, but still it can't absorb or break down certain nutrients. So it starts developing this like relationship where these bacteria get the space to live, and in return they break down things for us. That happens in long run, and in that process we train our immunity, learn to be resilient, and also improve the overall fighting strength. And I was sort of thinking how to sort of explain it with an example, and something really funny thought came to my mind. I don't know how much of this will be clear to all the people who are listening. Those who have watched the movie Parasite, the one which got the Oscar. Parasite movie.
Oscar-winning award movie. Yes.
Parasite is about a house and people coming to invade from a different sector, and there is an underground place where there is a family residing. And I was thinking that underground place is our gut, and the family residing, who is the local helpers, they have their own agenda, but they are also helping the family and protecting the family against invaders. So they stay there while the family lived there. If that invaders fail, external parasites can come in and attack, which causes real damage compared to having somebody protecting us, staying with us in a sort of protective relationship. It's a wide and a weird example, but I thought it's interesting to think about
It's
it like that.
Dr. Matthew is definitely relatable. I mean, or a lot of people have watched that movie. If they haven't, they will. And when they're watching it, they will be able to relate gut health and how bacteria actually helps your gut health, good and bad bacteria. All right, let me just tell all our audience who's just joined in that we're doing a special session on Positive Pulse. It's on Ayurveda and how this ancient science can help us boost our immunity through right nutrition. Dr. Matthew has already said this is not a short-term solution. It does take time to build that resilience to diseases, and that only happens with the right metabolism or the right Agni in our digestive systems. Okay, Dr. Matthew, I'm sure that I know you've said Ayurveda is not a short-term solution, but people still would like, it's a great time when you're sitting at home, it's a time to change your lifestyle, to imbibe better practices into your daily routine. So let me break down the day in several parts and ask you for recommendations. What is the best thing to calm and nourish your gut? The first thing when you get up in the morning, or let's say Agni that you talked about, whether it's calming the Agni or actually preparing it to do the best job for me through the day.
Right. So first thing to do is universally accepted what is best. There's a lot of sort of thought on that. If it is best for immunity, I'm not very sure, but it is definitely supportive in a large extent. And the first best thing to start your day with will be simple, plain warm water. You might have already heard about doing this from 100 different places, but I think the effect of it is so much underestimated because of its, this is similar to like when everybody started talking about hand washing against a very fatal illness, and we started doubting ourselves, is that sufficient? Should we create something more strong? So it's like that. This is a simple practice which has immense sort of ability, because the first thing is throughout the night there is a different form of resting and process happening in the gut, which does not activate the whole system, and we need to activate it as soon as we wake up to create an environment. Definitely you can make it much more interesting by adding, say, lemon, or the most favorite all over the world is ginger. All of these can be added to it, and having a couple of glasses, in fact not just one cup, a good big couple of glasses of hot water is the best way to start. And the effect of that on immunity is also really strong because of its stimulating and nourishing effect on our digestive system and our gut.
All right, very simple to do. I know that Ayurveda, because I've consulted with you twice in the last 5 years. So I know that you have taken me through understanding my dosha through a long questionnaire and then given me some dietary recommendations. But in general, I mean, people who are right now listening to you, what is a balanced diet as per Ayurveda, and food that you would recommend for all of us to have for lunch and for dinner within the Indian palette of food, doctor?
Yeah, definitely. I think even though Ayurveda always advocates and talks about personalized care and well-being based on your own body type, try and understand what's suitable for you, there are easy methods and general sort of concepts about food that needs to be followed. I think the most important thing is to look at your own digestive system and how it actually feels to decide what you need to eat. I think the first and the foremost principle before going into specifically lunch or dinner will be to observe whether you feel really hungry before you eat. I know a lot of people who might not feel hungry in the morning as soon as they wake up, but still force some cereals or something like a quick breakfast because it's time to have breakfast. That's not actually ideal. You should actually start with warm water, wait until you feel hungry, and then have a simple fruit or a handful of soaked nuts to start your day, so that it's starting gentle based on your appetite. Now, the general understanding in Ayurveda is that the middle part of the day between 10 and 2 approximately is sort of the strongest in terms of our digestive power, and possibly the lunch time is the best time to have a good wholesome meal. So it's ideal to have a mix of the grains and vegetables and uh, plant or animal protein, whichever you are comfortable with, and have a mix of these. And the ideal time is lunchtime. And
Mm-hmm.
lunchtime, the meal has more opportunity to completely digest, and the body gets a chance to properly absorb the nutrients from it. And towards the evening, taper the heaviness in the meal to as light as possible. So, ideal evening meal should be not rice or roti and dal and curry. It should be ideally a good sort of a dal soup or a good portion of vegetables and something prepared out of kabuli chana or chickpea, something which is light. It can be, if somebody has meat or fish, can have fish or light lean meat, but
Mm-hmm.
it shouldn't be too much of grains. It's purely also looking at it from the perspective of what's going on right now, because the illness that we are seeing right now is quite mucousy, more related to our respiratory system, affecting our upper respiratory and lungs. So
Mm-hmm.
any grains or too heavy milk products, even paneer or anything consumed too late at night, at dinner time, usually creates more mucousy tendency and clogging. When you wake up, you might be actually noticing it, or you could see it on your tongue. If you're used to tongue scraping, you can see that there is more coating on the tongue, and
Okay.
that denotes that you are at a slightly higher risk to getting into trouble related to breathing or respiratory issues. So ideal is to have a light and warm meal, and that's preferably a soup, better
Mm-hmm.
than a salad, easier for the system to break down and absorb. Make sure you add
Okay.
also some spices to it to make it easy to absorb.
All right. Okay, doctor, we've already started getting a lot of questions. So I'm going to ask this question, which Aditi has asked. She says, according to Ayurveda, fermented foods are not good. Aren't fermented foods good to provide bacteria to our gut? And I would also be surprised, doctor, because yogurt is something that is widely recommended, especially homemade yogurt, for good gut health.
Yeah, true. I don't know where this person Atiti got this information. Fermented food is bad for you. It's not right. Fermented food is actually quite good for you, and one of the best sources to get all the friendly bacteria
Mm-hmm.
into our gut. It's the best form of probiotic, better than taking those capsules and expensive pills. It's the only contraindication for having fermented food is when something is fermented too long, like for example, highly processed cheese or too much of vinegary or spicy pickles and things like that, may not be actually, its effect on our upper digestive system will be quite harsh compared to what benefit which we might get from it. So especially for somebody who might have a reflux or a what we call as heartburn like symptoms, it might not be
Mm-hmm.
ideal. Otherwise, yogurt is really good. Definitely, I know you like a nice sort of rice and yogurty preparation. That's actually perfect, actually, in this
All
situation.
right. Okay, we have another question. I'm going to skip Aditi's questions. She's asking a lot of questions. Aditi, I will set up a special time for you with Dr. Matthew separately. But let me take
मान
some other
जाएगी.
people. I know. So we have one question from Ayush who says, "Are we, as we are discussing metabolism and immunity, is there a quick check or test to determine the gut health and immunity?"
So, funny enough, the Ayurvedic sort of quick check for our gut health, not for immunity, for gut health, will be to tongue scrape. If there is not
Mm-hmm.
much coating on the tongue, and the second sort of sign is usually you feel good appetite, then that's a sign of good metabolism. Now, immunity, because we don't know exactly what we are trying to measure using the term immunity, it's usually difficult to understand. But if you catch a flu or if you have a wound or something and it heals really fast, that's a sign of good ojas. That's a sign of a good immunity function. It's not always true to correlate immunity with not having any illness at all. That is virtually impossible. It's mostly by chance
Okay.
people get illnesses. So you can have illness, but if you recover quickly enough, your immunity is strong. If you have good appetite and your tongue looks fresh, not much of coating, especially as soon as you wake up in the morning when you do a tongue scraping, that indicates good metabolism.
Oh, fantastic. That is such an easy test, Dr. Matthew. Again, just for all our audience who's just joined in, we're doing this very interesting session on Ayurveda and boosting your immunity through the right scientific principles of Ayurveda. In fact, we just spoke about testing whether your immune system is working at its optimum. All right, Dr. Matthew, let me ask you then one question, which, I hear, especially in people who are a little aged as well. They get easy stomach upsets and flatulence and acidity. And we've got this question from one of our viewers who's enrolled asking, how do you fix acidity? He's been having acidity for the last 15 days, quite a bit.
Right. So acidity can be because of various reasons, whether it is related to something anatomical like a hiatus hernia, or it could be related to acid productions in the excess acid production in the stomach. So that needs to be treated based on the actual cause. But in general, if you ask if most of us who feel occasionally, say, bloatedness symptoms or heartburn like symptom, I think the foremost easy quick fix for that is not just a quick fix, it's also a prevention, is to give rest to the digestive system. Giving rest doesn't mean complete fasting or staying away from food. That might actually increase acidity. It might be good to do really light and easy to digest meal for a certain period of time. Like I usually recommend as a general health and digestive function maintenance, it's good to do once a week going completely grain free. Grains will include rice or wheat or oats, barley, any form of ragi or any form of grains, and try having just fruits, vegetables, some small quantity of nuts and seeds throughout the day. Try avoiding all grains and anything too heavy, which can include also avoiding animal products. So keep it light and easy for a day every week, and that should immensely sort of help the system to heal itself naturally. If it doesn't get better, always get some help from a professional.
Some help. What about lentils? On a day that you're deciding to go light, can I have a lentil soup like you recommended earlier? Or do you think that just vegetables, fruits, and nuts and seeds is what you should do?
Lentils, pulses, bean varieties, they're all perfectly fine. I think it's best to just avoid those beans or lentils which might be heavy for you, like rajma or something. If you know that it doesn't it's not that easy for you to digest, avoid those. If it is easy to do something like a moong dal soup or moong chila, or it could be in any form, it doesn't have to be even soup, it's perfectly fine.
All right, this is something that I must get back to. I remember you telling me, and I followed this very diligently, doctor. And then, of course, you tend to slip into your bad ways again. Thanks for reminding me.
In fact, I was.
No, it really, really helps. Very quick question. In fact, you have kind of partially answered it in terms of fasting. So you've said do a light fast at least once a week, but then modern science and doctors say that basically don't go hungry at all during this time when your body needs all its energy to fight or probably stay at its optimum level of health. But you're saying you can fast, but it's intelligent fasting, not keeping yourself hungry, right?
That's completely right. So when I say fasting, when I am saying it's good for everybody, that fasting does not mean starvation or sort of prohibiting regularly needed nutrients. You are having all the nutrition required. You get all the protein from the lentils, carbohydrates from the vegetables, oils and necessary lipids from the nuts and seeds. So you get everything. Now, fasting in general is not to punish your body. You have to remember that. You have to feel comfortable with the process. If it's punishing your body, then that means your immunity will be under stress, which is not ideal in this situation or in any situation, not just now. And I agree that that's not the purpose. Now, if you are suffering from specific illnesses and your uh, practitioner who have consulted you recommends you to fast, say, for a day, or have only one kind of food like a mono diet or a fruit diet, that does make sense. It's based on some form of guidance that you're getting directly. Don't go for full fast just because somebody in a Facebook or something told you to do so.
Okay, in fact, there was a question on mono diet. You've already answered that you've got that recommendation. Do it, just don't go hungry at this time and put your immune system under any stress. Okay, doctor, very interesting question. Of course, Aman, we've answered your question, or Dr. Matthew has, not we, on your acid reflux issues. He said just go light one day a week and leave grain on that day, and you should be able to resolve this. Soumya asks us, is there a cure for obesity in Ayurveda and metabolism? For all of us, we do struggle with it. You know, when we are going to office, Dr. Matthew, we are walking through the day, there's a getting up process, getting into the car, you reach office, you're moving around office. Now, of course, that has slowed down. And with that, probably our metabolism has slowed down. So how do you boost that? And let's take the metabolism question before we take the obesity question. Deepika has asked us, how do I boost my metabolism?
Right. So boosting the metabolism is, again, not an easy trick. You start with what I said, like the warm drink in the morning. That is a good starting step, but you need to keep up with what your body requires, including having the right food groups, including having the right portions. It's very important. Keeping yourself active, keeping yourself mentally stress free as much as possible. You know, stress usually is considered to be a biggest antagonistic against the process of metabolism, because we will be always in a fight or flight mode. So that's another factor. Your sleep and routine is also important. So there is no easy quick fix I can unfortunately share like the other question answers. It has to be, metabolism is an output of a very dedicated routine. It doesn't have to be painful or doesn't have to be impossible. It's really, in fact, very simple. Just the idea is getting used to a ritual, and ritual means you're not questioning at every point that whether this process is good for me, whether this exercise is good for me. Given the choice, most human beings will not exercise if you're questioning the actual necessity of doing it. So you have to create a routine.
All right. What about spices now? I mean, so you've already answered the metabolism question. Obesity, there is no quick fix to obesity either. You have to eat right and you have to work out. That's, of course, one of the most important things you've said in a couple of your answers. Just for anybody who's joined us, we are at 4:30 right now. We're doing this very interesting session on the ancient science of Ayurveda and how it can help us boost our immunity just through right nutrition and good digestive system. I'm going to take this question from Leena Madhukar. She says, are there any homemade foods which can increase our immunity? Dr. Matthew, suddenly I also see that all the Indian spices have become superheroes, right? Even Western world is talking about having ginger, having turmeric, having cardamom, just all of the things which are part of our diet. I mean, this is something which is so intrinsic to Indian diet. Vitamin C. Take us through the benefits of some of these spices. And of course, Leena's question in terms of what can we do with our home food, which can use more of these spices or should use more of these spices?
Right. I think we have to look back at what it means to be a spice. Spice, we have been always thinking about it as just masala, to just give flavor to our food, but spices historically has been used as a preservative when there was no cold storage or fridge or freezer. So spices has this ability to prevent disintegration in any sort of food. That's first thing to remember. Second is, very intelligent people have actually tried to find out how much of this antioxidant value, or most food we call a superfood, is there in actually all the foods that we have. Lots of these berries and spinach or any food that we normally have, they've created a really nice database. I think the scale is called ORAC scale, is oxygen radical absorbance capacity. If you search online, you can find out. And in that scale, if you type in banana, it will tell you how much capacity it has to uh, scavenge free radicals and help anti-aging. Or if it is blueberry, you can write that. So in that list, if you look at the most richest concentration of antioxidant present in all foods, uh, out of the first 25, 20 of them are the spices that we use in our cooking. They are really concentrated in antioxidant value. And if you really look at foods that are now processed food, which are prepared using natural preservatives, some of them comes with labels saying no unnatural preservatives, then they would still have preservatives, and that preservative will be ideally, most probably will be garlic or turmeric and ginger, and adding those will increase the shelf life. So thinking about that aspect in our body, when we add these spices into our diet, generally it has this antioxidant and scavenging action, and at the same time it's protective. Now Ayurveda looked at most of these immunity related function by the concept of purpose. Food continues to serve its purpose even after it's being consumed. Like a fruit, for example, we might actually think that we know fruits are rich in, say, vitamin C and good for immunity, but in Ayurveda 2000 years ago, they didn't know about vitamin C, but they still knew that having fruits could protect you from certain illnesses, and they knew it from the concept that the fruits have a purpose in nature, and that purpose is to protect its seeds. So seeds are inside it, and it protects the seeds and nourishes the seed. And if you consume it, your body also gets that protection and nourishment, which was supposed to be given to the seed. Similarly, if you have a piece of chicken, for example,
Right.
chicken had a purpose. It was the muscle of a particular poor chicken. So if we have it, it will improve our muscles. It will improve our movements. So that sort of concept was available at that time, and they understood that if these foods can help us preserve certain food outside in the environment, it can actually help us protect also. So when we talk about spices, it has to be careful. It shouldn't mean that adding lots of chili means healthy food. It has to be a mix of different flavorful spices, natural as much as possible. When we keep on adding, I keep talking to people here who drink golden milk or turmeric milk every day to make sure that it's not just golden in color and it's real turmeric and it's organic, good quality one. If you're using it every day, make sure your spices are really good. Try and get whole spices, because in India it will be easier to get it, and then try and powder it yourself in small batches and then use it in your cooking. You'll see the difference in flavor as well as its effect on your general health.
Fair enough, Dr. Matthew. So buy whole spices and grind them at home, and you will get better benefits of it. Buy organic if you can, especially spices. Dr. Matthew, may I ask you to just adjust your speaker a little bit, because this time we had a lot of disturbance coming in your answer. Yeah.
Okay,
so I think
is it better now?
Yeah, it's much better now. So I think a little bit your Bluetooth might have shifted a little bit, but let me take the next question, and I'm going to take, very simple question. A lot of us are having this problem. I think you've become now a nutritionist consultant as well to us. Manoj is asking us and asking you how to deal with the sugar and sweet craving, especially after dinner.
Okay.
Is there anything that we can have which is natural and will not harm us as much as picking up a pastry or a mithai?
Right. So the two things there. One is having a sweet after dinner can become a really strongly ingrained habit. So breaking that habit will mean that it's best to not have anything for at least 2 days, and then you will be able to resist that feeling. Now, the another point of view is that if your body is demanding for sweet taste, then you have to give sweet taste. Then you might have to look at what you are eating through the day, and maybe you're just having healthy food, thinking that it's healthy food. You're just having salads and food which is really devoid of any sweet flavor or that sort of a grounding, satisfying flavor in it. Then that means you will crave for sweet unlimited time until you have something really sweet. The real sort of thing that you have to look at is, doesn't have to be sugar. You can use beetroot or carrot in your meals to make sure there is some sweet elements in it. Make sure you put a sprinkle of cinnamon, say, in your morning cereals to make sure that it has a little bit of sweetness that way. You can also have mulethi or licorice as a tea, especially in the evening. That would be the best source of natural sweetness. It's much more sweeter than sugar without any of those bad effects, and it's quite soothing for the throat. It's soothing for our digestive system. Might actually help sleep better as well. So, some licorice tea will be a good substitute when you are weaning yourself off the addiction.
So, very important takeaways, and this is something that I've also grappled with. One is that if you are craving a lot of sugar, probably you've done a excessively healthy diet through the day and not had that even bare minimum sugar, which is part of of carbs or carbohydrates like grains. The other thing is, if you have to wean yourself, then just do go without sugar for some time, and substitute it with naturally sweet tasting teas like licorice based teas. That might be a better idea. All right, Dr. Matthew, I'm going to take this question now. Manavendra Singh wants to know, just want to inquire, what should be the right quantity of rice and the best time to take it? In a lot of North India, rice is looked at with a lot of suspicion that, it is more fattening than wheat is and grain is. And do not eat rice at night. If you have to have rice, have it at lunchtime. Is that something that you would agree with?
Right. To answer the first Manvendra's question, I think there is no right proportion of rice suitable for everybody. We can't actually say this much quantity of rice is good or this much is not. And to look at the second question, I think generally people will be suspicious to those foods which are not naturally sort of growing in the vicinity of that particular place. For example, here in UK, generally the source of carbohydrate is potatoes, and the amount of potatoes that goes into normal people's diet will be scary for anybody else who are not used to it, like big chunks of potato and butter. And there is a huge amount of suspicion towards rice, and generally slowly towards bread and wheat as well. In Kerala, like where I am from, I would have rice or rice preparation for breakfast, lunch, and dinner normally in a normal day.
Yes.
So there is the goodness and badness comes from what you are used to and whether you are able to digest it. Always portion control is important. And if you ask me when to take it, ideally lunch or breakfast time is also perfectly fine to have rice or any grains per se. It doesn't have to be just rice. Evening meals should be generally a preparation towards getting to proper rest and sleep. It shouldn't be a carbohydrate heavy rich food, because you're not going to do anything to burn it off after that, and it will be essentially stored and it will slow your system down. So lunchtime or earlier.
All right. I'm going to take two more questions. Tamalkar wants to know, how would you suggest an occasional detox for bodies and in what intervals? Dr. Matthews already said that once a week fasting on a non-grain diet is highly recommended. Dr. Matthew, I'm not sure what she means by detox, but I'm assuming that it would be a fast. So once a week, is that what you would recommend, or it can be more?
Yeah, so again, detox is again a wide umbrella term which is being used in different meanings nowadays. So if it is just as a concept to maintain health, maintain good body function, then once a week fasting is the safest, I wouldn't say ideal, but safest method for everybody hearing to this this chat can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. If you are looking at stronger detox, then there are medicines and combinations that can be used, but that should be with proper advice and proper guidance. And in Ayurveda, we focus on cleansing a lot, and the core of our treatment comes in as detoxification, or it's called as panchakarma. different methods of elimination, and that elimination process can be enhanced in different ways through diet, through medicines, through enemas. Different methodologies are there, which should be from a practitioner and in an appropriate place that can offer that treatments.
So don't try it at home just because you've read it somewhere on the web that this is how you should detox. I would say that because I've gone through it twice over, Dr. Matthew, along with your instructions, that it is serious business, Ayurvedic detox, and it has to be done under proper guidance. Let me take Kaval's second question. Would you recommend ghee compared to butter or oil, even in elderly people with cardiac issues? There is such a raging debate, Dr. Matthew, on ghee, and to
Yes,
use it or not to use it.
yes, ghee is always definitely preferred, especially if somebody is elderly. I'll tell you why. Because the butter that you have, or anything instead of ghee that you will be much more harder to digest because it's not fully cooked. When butter is heated for a long time, and then we take out the solids, milk solids from it, in that process we are removing lactose. We are also removing casein, which are two different elements that are really hard to digest, especially in advanced age. As your age progresses, you are totally enabled to digest casein. uh, that is a milk protein. Only children can digest it properly, and lactose also becomes increasingly difficult and can create intolerance quite easily as age progresses. So ghee is definitely better. Now, when I say that, it is the unsaturated saturated fat conversation. It's being taking place everywhere. A lot of researches are for and against it. I think moderation is the key. Keep taking it as much as you're used to. So somebody is used to taking a little bit of ghee on their roti, or having ghee sometimes in a little bit of rice, should continue to take it. It's actually good. There are a lot of benefits possibly from it. Somebody who just saw it in the internet and started at the age of 80 might not get the same benefit. They might actually struggle to get used to it. So don't try to introduce at an advanced age just because you've heard that is good.
Okay.
Same applies to all different things. Sorry, not just ghee.
I bet. Don't fall into fads, especially for senior citizens. Their bodies are used to a certain diet, and unless medically advised differently, I think that diet should be followed through.
I should say that because here in UK, I had a person who was forcing her elderly mom to take apple cider vinegar. So I was just thinking that's also a fad, and might not be the best in this context. I think stick to what your body is used to and feels good with.
All right. I have two diabetes questions, so I am going to take them with you. Ankit asks you, Dr. Matthew, please advise on some remedy to cure insulin resistance, where all carbs we eat end up getting accumulated as fat. And there is another question from an anonymous attendee, all right, but not given a name, but said, is there a must every day for a diabetic to boost immunity?
Right, diabetes, definitely, it's a very relevant question. It's one of the major risk factors for this current COVID-19 illness. I think there are a couple of factors to look at. Diabetes do create a major disadvantage if you're just relying on insulin or a particular medicine and not doing anything on your end to take care of your own metabolism. To look at the insulin resistance part, most of the time insulin is only taken in and utilized majorly by our muscle tissue. So we need to sort of make sure that the muscles are enhanced, and it's not about building up muscles by doing weight training or anything. Just do activities that involve your core. Your core actually has more muscles than your hands and feet, which are efficiently utilizing the glucose stored in your body. There is one muscle which never stop. In fact, two set of muscles which never stop even when we are sleeping and do utilize a lot of energy. Is one our circulation or heart function, and other is our diaphragm and intercostal or rib muscles attached to our ribs. So make sure you are utilizing that. Do breathing exercises, which will have equal impact on our ability to utilize glucose and reduce insulin resistance. At the same time, it's a calming activity which will also in turn help with immunity. If there is one thing I would recommend, I think in India we underestimate a lot of things that we have got. I think diabetes will be nothing if people start following grandmother's advice, like to have methi. If we sprout methi and have that regularly with our meal, or just have methi on its own. Karela, methi, they're all being made into capsules and sold all over the world. And we will start taking those capsules very soon if we don't have that in our diet.
So methi, in fact, is a great, and like you rightly said, grandmothers have been suggesting that have methi, have karela. Your food must have bitter taste as well, which is also something that Ayurveda says that you should have in a meal, probably a balance of all 5 tastes. Just quickly, if you can run us through what those tastes are.
Yes, I can definitely tell you. And in fact, we talk about having a balanced meal, and we know now the balance is from protein, carbohydrates, vitamins and minerals, etc. But imagine 2000 years ago, they didn't know about protein or vitamins. So the idea of a balanced meal came from intuitively being attracted to different flavors. So the acharyas or Ayurvedic doctors at that time guided people to have a balanced meal by having a meal or at a single meal time all different flavors. In fact, there are 6 flavors: sweet, sour, salty, spicy, bitter, and astringent. Astringent is the most complex to understand, but it's basically green leafy vegetables, lentils, pulses, all the things which we like moong dal and things like that are astringent in flavor, and it's a good sort of balance. Now, each of them has different functions. Sweet, sour, salty is more nourishing and more sort of helping with building up the body tissue, whereas spices, bitter, astringent, they are more healing, and they are more sort of helping the body recycle the things that we need to recycle, break down, cleanse the body naturally on an everyday routine. So if we sort of follow a more traditional diet pattern, you will always notice that there are some bitter leaves and some astringent elements always in our traditional thali kind of a meal.
All right. I'm going to ask you this question on vitamin C. You talked about, sour things. Everyone's talking about Indian gooseberry, its role in boosting immunity, because it is supposedly just the best form of vitamin C, strongest form of vitamin C available very easily in the country. Does Ayurveda have a view on vitamin C and its role in boosting body immunity, Dr. Matthew?
I think, like I said earlier, most fruits are considered to be protective. And that was from the understanding that it continues its purpose of protecting the seed to protecting your body. Saying that amla or Indian gooseberry is one of the highest in that ORAC scale, or oxygen radical absorbance capacity scale, and it's very rich in vitamin C and other antioxidants. See, vitamin C is one of those vital amine that we found, and we managed to market it properly. But there are many others which we don't know. Unfortunately, we are so stuck with thinking that nutrition and life is quite simple, and we like to keep it simple. But that sort of saying that things that I don't know doesn't exist, which is not true. So I think whole fruits is much better than vitamin C extracted out of, say, corn somewhere in America. It's always best to have it natural, have it in good balance daily in your routine, because vitamin C sometimes is not properly understood. It's a very water soluble element from this fruit. So it just washes out of your body every minute when you drink water, or just even not drink water, it still washes out from your body. So you need a very regular supply of vitamin C, vitamin B, etc. for good immunity. Vitamin A, D, E, and K, the remaining ones, are oil soluble. and they tend to be stored in our body quite efficiently and are metabolized and utilized when it's required by our liver function. So you can have, say, carrot and things like that, which will supply, for example, beta carotene and vitamin A. That will be stored. You don't if you miss it one day, it doesn't nothing happens in terms of immunity. But if you don't have fruits every day, it does actually have a negative effect.
Wow, that's really an interesting observation and advice to everyone. Don't focus on the vitamin C, just have fruits. Simple, and you will get your vitamin C that you require for immunity. Dr. Matthew, a lot of people talk about Triphala, which is something that I take with warm water every night, and there is a range of over-the-counter herbs and powders which are supposed to be good for your digestive system and well-being, which people can have without any side effects or anything negative happening to their body. Would you recommend some during this time which can be helpful to everyone?
Oh, definitely. So Ayurveda consider a certain group of medicine to be what we call as rasayana, or nourishing by nature. And when we say nourishing, it's not just helping with nourishing the body tissues, it nourishes the strength of the body, nourishes our immunity, nourishes our skin, all of that. So there are easy available ones, like you said, Triphala is Amla with Harad and Vipithaki, which is a really efficient combination if you want to help your immunity as well as your digestive system, because it's a good sort of support for the metabolic system as well. If you would like to just focus on immunity and respiratory health, I think one very easily available one will be Pipali. Pipali is long pepper. People, I don't exactly know how it's called in Hindi, but Sanskrit name is Pipali, and the actual English name is long pepper. It is from the same family as black pepper, used in lots of Ayurvedic medicines, but it's also available in stores because it's used in certain specific cuisines as well. And that's a really good support for the upper respiratory tract and lungs. And it is a good rasayana. Pipali is a recommended rasayana in this time. Amla is very good. Triphala is very good. Tulsi is not per se rasayana, but that's also quite a good support in this situation to keep taking regularly.
All right. I mean, this is extremely important in this time for your respiratory system maintenance. Also, Pipli, like you said, like Triphala, does it have a name or does it come in the name of Pipli as a powder?
No, Triphala is 3 berries, 3 phal, which doesn't have Pipali.
Okay,
Pipali is a different one.
All right. And in what name does it come? Does it come in the name of Pipli powder in a Ayurvedic shop?
All yes, right. Okay. Just Pipali powder.
All right. Sometimes I just have to ask these low common denominator questions because you're all learning, Dr. Matthew. Okay, we just have completely run out of time, but Mr. Malik has posted 2 questions. So Malik, your question on, is it okay to drink hot milk with sugar? Well, avoid sugar. That's something that doctors already said, but yes, it's okay to have hot milk. But let me ask Dr. Matthew, who's a consultant to Ananda in the Himalayas, to answer this question. Please let us know some do's and don'ts for bathing. Focus on warm water, soap, bath at night, Dettol liquid in water, towel use, etc. Okay, so the hygiene has gone from something as basic as hand washing to bathing itself. Is it soap enough? Do we need to use Dettol in our water? Dr. Matthew, I'm just going to make it a simple question for you.
Yeah, the simple answer is don't use Dettol in your bath. The long-term answer is to not even use soap every day and not even use too strong soap for a long time, because you are reducing your immunity by doing that, because your skin, without people talking about it, is a bigger ground for bacteria and friendly bacteria. If there is bacteria inside our gut, it's really common sense that our skin also harbors a larger quantity of microbes, which has a positive function on our immunity. If you make room for pathogens by removing those friendly ones every night or every day by putting Dettol and strong soaps, then those unfriendly bacteria will start attacking your skin. That's your first line of defense gone. So my advice is use less chemicals. If you want, you can use everyday besan powder on your body. I'm not sure whether it will clog your drainage, but it'll be good for your skin.
And even moong dal powder. I mean, that's something which is used very often in South India. Just powdered moong dal powder. So you're saying that hands, yes, keep washing with soap. This is something which is absolutely known. But for bathing, do not use Dettol for sure. Use soap. You don't have to scrub your body with soap morning, evening. You may get rid of good bacteria as well. And you can sometimes substitute that with healthier, less chemical-free powders like moong dal powder and besan. Okay, Dr. Matthew, there could be more questions and they are coming, but I think we have taken enough and ample time of yours. It's 1 hour. I can't keep you waiting anymore. It has been the most useful session for me, who's already done 2 consultations with you in the last 5 years and 2 detox programs at Anandaya Himalayas. I'm still learning so much because, the situation has changed. We are now facing a new health risk. So from that perspective and from that lens, it's been a very useful session. Thank you so much for doing this for us.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaskar. And to all our webinarians, this is a new word that I'm coining, people who've joined us on this conversation and chat. Thank you so much for joining in. Tell us what is it that you'd like us to do. This is an initiative by Brookfield Properties to just make sure that we can bring in the best experts and guidance during these times for your health, your safety, your well-being. So write into us on Twitter or on our Facebook accounts, on Insta, and we'll make sure we bring you some of the best experts in the world for advice. Thank you very much, Dr. Matthew. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.